Well,
Welcome
okay.
to DRTSPR show. This is Dr. Tangella Shiva Prasad Reddy alias Dr. TSPR. Namaste, Adab. Hello and a warm welcome to D. Narasimha Reddy Garu, is retired professor economics from Hyderabad Central University. This is part 2. We are taking off from where we left yesterday, Ugadi Day. We started it on Yuga Adi as per Telugu nomenclature. And then we have Karnataka and other states, Andhra Pradesh, other states, and in different states it was celebrated yesterday. A new beginning which we had already made yesterday in exposing corruption in the biggest way in the form of electoral bonds. Electoral bonds are nothing but funding political parties by various corporates, individuals in an abnormal way. It is unconstitutional. That is why Supreme Court did strike it off. February 2024. And after that, when it made SBI to expose, SBI took time and it was trying to play tantrums. Of course, with the intervention of the government of the day, they wanted to disclose them only after the election results are out. That is when Supreme Court stepped in, threatened of contempt, and immediately everything was out. And after that, it is absolutely the dirtiest aspect of any electoral politics. India never witnessed. It is a people participatory constitutional democracy. But political parties stooping to such level of morality, no morality, I should say. Where is the morality? For the sake of continuing in power with that illegal, corrupt money, come whatever may, they made elections and electioneering so costlier during COVID-19. They have increased the spending limit of the candidates and political parties. Political parties have no limit. That is very surprising. We will discuss. Mind you, all citizens of India, political parties need not furnish any income tax. And even capital gains tax also they need not furnish. What is that nonsense? First, that should be controlled. Not just candidates, even political parties should have a control and there should be a source. Otherwise, this is what is happening. In the name of political parties, last episode, Narasimha Reddy brought a very valiant feature. Modi was laughing off. What is the electoral bonds? Then when we went into the accounts, 28,000 crores were spent by BJP in 1 year. What is that nonsense? From where is that they're getting and why do you need money? Is it a service in a transparent and accountable way? Because we are a people participatory constitutional democracy. A service has become a tool in the hands of corporate elements, that to corrupt corporate elements. Now electoral bonds have clearly exposed, even in the name of lottery and the other capital gain, people from China and all over world can fund the Indian electoral system and thereby they can control political parties, elected representatives, making a fun of our democracy. That is why the second part is more important now. Why should the political party should have concessions from income tax, and why is that there is no limit for political parties funding and all? That is nonsense. How can you divide political parties or separate political parties and those contesting from political parties as their representatives? And we are going to elect. This is my confusion. I'll ask gentleman Narasimha Reddy Garu. Before that, I'll just try to show you 2 or 3 as we have been doing. Still our WhatsApp is making. This is what we have done yesterday. And in continuation today, I'm just going to show you certain things. Modi has largely been mum on one of India's biggest corruption sagas. Contrary to what Modi said in a recent TV interview, the electoral bond scheme, when unmasked, has inbuilt features for extortion and quid pro quo services and may be part of the government's larger scheme involving investigating agencies. This is very bad. This is not the way we expected our democracy to function. And then see how in Gujarat, a Dalit farmer tricked into donating 10 crore to BJP. Electoral bonds on 11th October 2000. Electoral bonds worth 11 crore, 14,000 were purchased in the name of 6 members of a Dalit family from the Dalit family alleged that they were tricked into buying these electoral bonds by an official of Wellspun Enterprises, a company linked to Adani Group. It's a Goenka company who is trying to usurp so much of government and private and public land in Hyderabad. And he buys 260, spending 260 crores flat for in Mumbai for his wife. And see how these fellows, Wellspun had acquired approximately 43,000 square meter of our agriculture land in Anjar, and they paid him compensation. This money was part of compensation we were given as per law. But at the time of depositing this money, Mahendra Singh Soda, a senior general manager at the company, told us that such a huge amount can result in trouble with the income tax department. He then introduced us to the electoral bond scheme, which he said would ensure that we get 1.5 times the amount in a few years. We are illiterate people. We had no clue what the scheme was. But at that time, it sounded very convincing, 1.5 times. The family has filed a complaint, but the police is yet to register an FIR. Police says it will be filed after investigation. Savakara, in his complaint, also alleged that BJP Anjar city president Hemant Rajnikant Shah was part of the meetings. Anjar-based lawyer representing Manwar family said that collector had valued the land at rupees 17,500 per square meter. The total compensation was estimated to be close to 76 crore. But Wellspun was not willing to pay this huge sum. That is why it tricked. Now Modi and Amit Shah, what is that you are going to do? Your Gujarat police is not registering a case. So such type of illegalities through electoral bond scheme, once again to the poor, and not just through electoral bond scheme, there are many ways through which the parties have been getting money. Electoral bond has exposed the corrupt corporate companies, illegalities of those companies who are running losses, still paying hundreds of crores, and those companies who are making marginal profits, 1 crore, 2 crore, but they are ending up paying hundreds of crores to political parties. That means black money is being turned into white through these electoral bonds. That is why this is a big exposure. Let us go to our guest now. Yes, sir, please.
Well, okay. We have seen the way in which electoral bonds were introduced, and we were essentially trying to focus on the nature of, let's say, the electoral bond scheme. And we called it as draconian because it's immoral. Its design is completely in the manner that deceives the larger public in a democracy like India. It is designed to, let's say, do things in favor of those in power, which could exert coercion through that of, let's say, the institutions like ED, IT, and several other agencies to get, let's say, resources for their own party purposes. Of course, even otherwise, they have been using it to coerce companies and then, let's say, individuals to turn them into their favor. So now I think one of the issues that comes in before we get into that of the consequences of this kind of a scheme, the beneficiaries of this scheme. Of course, we have seen that the major beneficiary of the available information, almost 55% of the total resources that are accounted so far now, because there's much more to come in matching and other kind of exercises that are being done now. More than, of course, 16,000 crores. The ruling BJP party gets 55%, something like 8,500 crores. But I think there are other parties are also getting money. For instance, of course, their share is, let's say, much less, down, let's say, about 10 to 11%. For instance, the next highest contribution is to that of, interestingly, Congress party. It's also a national party. It gets something like 1,850 crores. It's about 11% of the total money that has been encashed through that of electoral bonds. The third share, highest share in this total contribution is Trinamool Congress. It's surprising because it's a regional party. It gets something like 1,707 crores of this.
Almost on par with Congress. National party.
Almost on par. The fourth one is also a regional party. This is the BRS, Bharatiya Rashtriya Samsthas, which is a committee which also gets something like 1,407 crores.
See,
and of course,
a regional party.
regional parties, yeah, and of course, DMK also gets fifth or sixth place in. So the idea is that are they in compliance with that of, let's say, the ruling party in some of the things where this kind of scheme introduced? But I think as far as the information available, these parties have kept mum. Only party which went to the Supreme Court by filing a public interest litigation was Communist Party of India, Marxist. The others, let's say, just waited. They should have strongly protested it. Instead, they have become now parties. What we are accusing of, let's say, the immoral kind of, let's say, contributions that they are getting, they're also parties. They don't have moral stature. And if perhaps they strongly disagree, they can come out and let's say protest even now. We don't hear such strong voices from these opposition parties against this method. They could at least say that, of course, parties require finances. People contribute, companies contribute, and institutions contribute. There's nothing new. But there should be transparency. And as perhaps is pointed out by the Supreme Court itself, if you want some secrecy or let's say personal kind of, let's say, privacy, you contribute less than, let's say, 20,000. You don't have to reveal anything. But if you're doing more, one must know, people in the country must know who is getting what and how the country's political parties as a part of democracy are mobilizing their own resources. This is the question. Now we turn to that of, let's say, the revelations that are coming in, because it's now, as we said in the beginning itself, when it comes to the question of, let's say, the funds collected through that of electoral bonds, with all these cunning kind of, let's say, clauses introduced in that, it is still not the only source or not even the major source of, let's say, political parties' funds. In fact, it's only a part of that. And therefore, we have to see what perhaps we are focusing, although it is a very small part of the funds received by the political parties, this has to be emphasized. What is more important when we discuss electoral bonds is that these electoral bonds scheme has exposed the parties' behavior, immoral kind of behavior. That's it. They've designed it deliberately to cheat people and then get, let's say, money from corporates. And the other side of this is promote corporations which perhaps have been managing their accounts through that of, let's say, not fair disclosures, not even, let's say, showing profits, not even paying taxes. Some of these companies, corporates are also very happy with this kind of a scheme because now they can hide their money. They can contribute to the ruling party and let's say get away with that of, let's say, not paying properly accounting. There will not be any raid of income tax on those, let's say, companies. This is the worst part of it. This is what we refer to. This we have referred to quid pro quo. The major, larger, it's not one-to-one quid pro quo. We are talking in terms of one company pays, like say our mega company pays 140 crores in to that of BJP and gets 14,400 crores worth of, let's say, twin tunnels program in, let's say, project in Bombay. That's one-to-one. But if you take the total, let's say the total picture of, let's say, the contributions that they receive and the dealings that they have, either not properly paying taxes or starting, let's say, shell companies and avoiding, let's say, taxes, or manipulating, let's say, accounts, or let's say getting undue favors by way of getting allotted like resources like either uh, uh, hydel projects or let's say coal projects, or these things happen. I mean, this is what we refer to crony capitalism. That if you refer to that, the crony capitalism we talk of liberal capitalism where rules are followed. Everything is transparent. People know what is happening. Profits are made. There is nothing wrong in liberal capitalism. Wages are fairly supposed to be paid. But in crony capitalism, they show that profits are not shown completely. They suppress, let's say, information. They get into hand in glove with that of the government. In the process, you start changing the very policies of the government. For instance, if you take into consideration the entire corporate sector in India, we know that for some time there has been increasing inequalities. Corporates are becoming huge because they're becoming giants. And it is under this particular neoliberalism, there is no restriction on monopolies. There is no restriction on mergers and acquisitions, unbridled kind of thing. For instance, if you record telecom, they totally destroyed public sector telecom services. Now only a couple of companies manage the whole telecom. And then when we turn to that at the ports, there is only one huge thing that they have front page advertisement saying 1/4 of the entire sea cargo is handled by us. What does it mean? He is a huge monopoly and swallowing others also slowly. Similarly, the tendency is towards that of monopoly in airports, the coal mining, and worse is, let's say, grain storing. Adanis are number one grain storage facility owners. They, let's say, store the grain for Food Corporation of India, get rents from the Food Corporation of India. This is the monopoly kind of a capitalism, which we call largely, this process has been happening consciously, coming in hand in glove with that of the government, influencing the government policy. It goes to the extent where I think the corporate tax in 2018 has been reduced from 30% to that of 22%. It doesn't mean all corporations pay even this 22%. We'll see now how companies which are donating through electoral bonds. I mean, this is we are saying now this is happening, but it is electoral bonds which gave us some kind of a basic facts about it. We could say that there are companies which do not pay income tax or avoid income tax. There are companies which show losses, don't say all their income and let's say expenditure accounts properly, therefore keep on showing losses. And then when we turn to that of electoral bonds, we have an opportunity now. We see that who is contributing to that of, let's say, electoral bonds. What is the company showing from the point of view of profits or, let's say, income tax? So this is the major thing we have in a democracy. This kind of information tells the public that, look, we are being ruled by a type of, let's say, parties which do not have a moral ethical standing. That's why I think it's called as, let's say, something like whoever is in power tries to assert themselves in various ways in policy, in terms of using institutions or devaluing institutions. And that's why it's called, that VDEM, which classifies democracies across the world. Every year it brings out a report called, let's say, State of Democracy in the world. Each country is ranked. We get a rank of something like 135 out of, let's say, 180 countries. And it's also brands India as, let's say, electoral autocracy. There is not much of democracy. And in fact, the kind of money playing role, there are many people now believe that India is a plutocracy. It's ruled by money, that those who are moneyed people. Therefore, if we turn to that of, let's say, one interesting exercise that is available is, let's say that by matching this money we now see how many companies, this is only an example, doesn't mean 1,300 companies contributed to that of electoral bonds. This is, I think, analysis of, let's say, 45 companies that you find in Hindu and other places. Out of this 45 companies, something like 33 companies, which are fairly large companies. It includes, on the top of the list is Bharati Airtel. It's a huge company. In fact, these 33 companies actually suffer losses. And they suffer losses. Out of these 33 companies, 16 of them do not also pay income tax. They show losses and therefore don't pay any income tax. This data is for not 1 year, because it's an average to that of, let's say, 1 year, there may be a mistake. Therefore, this data refers to 2017 to that of 23 for 5 years. If you refer to that, not 5 years, 7 years. If you refer to this 7-year period, these 33 companies have been continuously showing losses, average, every year. But they are continuously contributing to that of electoral bonds from 18 onwards. So when we turn to this, how is it possible? In fact, this is exactly the Supreme Court pointed out. There is another dimension, that is not only electoral bond scheme is unconstitutional. Supreme Court pointed out, saying that according to the so-called finance bill that was made to remove certain things as a restriction. For instance, one of the things is there was a restriction to electoral contribution to that of political parties, that they can contribute up to 7.5% of their 3 years average profits. That was the provision. In making the electoral bond scheme, this provision was removed. In fact, the Supreme Court pointed out this particular element is also unconstitutional. Somebody now must question that. That has to go back to that of 7.5% of the profits average to that of 3 years. That should be the norm. But they have removed it. That removal is also called as unconstitutional. Therefore, these 33 companies, which have contributed over 7 years, something like 481 crores, continuously show losses. On the other hand, for instance, the losses shown are very interesting. Sum of net profit. The first company, that's, I said that the so-called the biggest telecom company, Bharati Airtel, it shows 76,954 crores loss in these 7 years.
Goodness.
70 norms. That means every year they are showing losses. And then you turn to that of, let's say, income tax. Naturally, they are showing that there is a negative income tax, means 8,250. It means this is an interesting income tax exercise. No, if you incur continuous losses, you can carry forward those losses. When you get profits, that's adjusted against that. Therefore, they are keeping 8,500 as a negative profit, negative tax. So when they make profits, it will be adjusted. They don't have to pay that tax up to that of 8,000. I mean, this is the kind of accounting that perhaps comes out in this process. And there are, of these 45, there are another 6 companies which continuously show losses. But I think they also, I mean, not losses, they show some profits, but their contributions are disproportionate to profits. For instance, they show one company shows that the profit is something like, let's say, 1.5 crores. And then contribution is something like 185 crores. This is the question that the Supreme Court also raised this. This is also a question. When somebody is continuously contributing more than what perhaps they are earning as profits, there is a doubtful kind of a thing. And the third category here, they make donations, but when it comes to the question of, let's say, taxes, there are 0 taxes. They don't pay any taxes. but I think they're still contributing to that. Of where do you get this? That's the rule of that's where Supreme Court points out the provision 7.5% of the total profits. That's the standard. You are trying to remove all that and making these companies to show that they are, let's say, now free to contribute. But this is the where we move on to that. We talked in terms of quid pro quo. This is the second dimension. This is largely through that of, let's say, shell companies. You create a company, Benami company, and then, of course, use it for contributions. That they will keep on showing, let's say, their accounts, very small incomes. And then, of course, some money, let's say that somebody who has made money, avoided taxes, income tax directly, is putting that money, making these companies, shell companies, to pay for it. This is the biggest danger. Much of the black money is converted into that avoid through that shell companies. Most of the time, shell companies are established offshore, that you make profits, let's say, for example, the profit making is not necessarily a direct process. A company which takes a contract in Maharashtra gets equipment through that of a company, its own subsidiary in some place like, let's say, Dubai, where taxes are 0 or 1 or 2% on such activities. And then here sells to the same local mother company at a higher price. It imports something very cheap into Dubai account and shows that it is selling into that of, let's say, the mother company at a higher price. This is what we refer to transfer pricing, and makes money, and that money is transferred to that of some other. The Dubai company makes money, it's transferred to that of a shell company somewhere in Mauritius. This is the way in which they generate black money. And that money is easily siphoned with another shell company which contributes to that of, let's say, parties. This is the most dangerous kind of a tendency. In fact, all this is largely because of the nature of regulations, which are very liberal in favor of, let's say, the corporate sector. And then the mutual, this is exactly why we say you become more liberal to corporate sector, they become, let's say, more liberal in contributing to you. This is the nexus, which we call as a crony capitalism. In fact, this is happening ever since last, let's say, 20, 25 years or more than that, ever since the global neoliberalism has come in. And then the accounts show that when it comes to that wealth, there is enormous increase in the wealth. This is the times when we talk in terms of billionaires. In fact, looking at India, the World Inequality Lab has brought about a report on, latest report is 22-23. That report shows that when it comes to the question of incomes, the title of the report is from what is called independent, from British Raj to that. They have accounts from 1922. Because in 1922, India started income tax. They have data from various sources. And therefore, they brought out this report saying from British Raj to that of billionaire Raj. And then, of course, they show now what is happening because of this government policy, that at least let's not go back. And if you look immediately, it comes to that of, ever since this government has come to power, from 2014-15, to that of 22-23. In this period, that the top 1% of, let's say, the income of the top 1% in the national income, says actually, is about 23%. This is supposed to be 23% of the national income going to that of 1% is the highest any country anywhere in the world. And in fact, that's why they make an observation. It is not only any country anywhere in the world, it is also highest even in the country. If you take British times where there was no regulation, there were jamindars, bigger people, even then there was no such inequality. And if you turn to wealth, see, income is different, wealth is a property. That when it comes to that, the top 1%, during this period, it has come to that of 40% of the total wealth of India. And in fact, they say this, they quote this, the billionaire Raj headed by the India's modern bourgeoisie, more unequal than the British Raj headed by the colonial rulers. That means that's the kind of, let's say, liberalism that we have, neoliberalism. So it this kind of a thing is created by the kind of programs that we have, liberalization we have, and the freedom that they have. And therefore, there is nothing surprising. In fact, world over also, they say of the inequality of wealth is promoted 1/3 through that of inheritances, because this inheritance business leading to that of inequality is a last 30 years phenomenon in India. If they're making so much of money,
Yeah.
they have to leave behind their people. That's how I think when it comes to the question of inequality, 1/3 is inherited. 1/3 of this inequality is due to that of this crony capitalism. Therefore, I think when we turn to the question of electoral bonds is given as an opportunity to see how this process of the present crony capitalist kind of system is pushing, let's say, the wealth of the rich to that of an extreme higher level, whereas the poor, I think, continue to suffer. And doesn't mean that they continue to become poorer, but they don't, there is no chance of anywhere for them to lift them up their levels of living. Therefore, we see this electoral bond scheme as something which gives us the basic information about the nature of country's capitalism that we are living in. It's highly biased. And therefore, whatever we suggest, unless there is a strong kind of, in fact, questions are raised, can this survive at this rate? With this kind of governments, can this be sustained? Can the inequality be sustained? Can this kind of a rule with, let's say, rule through that of agencies, rule through that of, let's say, manipulation of, let's say, acts and other things? That's where I think on the one side, they point out there are still several things to be probed when it comes to the question of electoral bonds, including that of the unconstitutional kind of measures that have been taken to support electoral bonds. It's one thing to say electoral bonds are unconstitutional. It is the other thing to say that several amendments made to certain acts like Finance Act and then, of course, the People's Representation Act, all these also unconstitutional. And therefore, there is much that is likely to come now. And of course, this exposure becomes much more important in understanding the nature of, let's say, democracy that we have. In fact, as the famous, many of us are fond of quoting one of the famous writers now who said that when she was very young and going to school, there was an old lady growing in the garden carrots. And then they would look for the old lady, she will be sitting there. When she is not there, they will go pick up the carrot and take the bottom carrot and then put back the green leaves there. The old lady is happy because she doesn't know what is happening. This is hollow. Indian democracy is slowly becoming like that. The carrot is being eaten away by these kind of measures. All that we see as democracy is only shallow leaves that are fluttering outside. Therefore, for everyone, it is to look through and take, let's say, a strong kind of, let's say, resentment and protest against this kind of a rule. I'll stop here.
Yeah. And one question, how is that political parties and those representing political parties, the taboo is there on spending? Political parties can collect anything, no income tax, no
Exactly.
any tax. And how is that, how do you look at
See, in fact, the People's Representation Act, that way itself is something wrong there. People's Representation Act puts a limit on the candidate contesting. There is some kind of, let's say, assembly election, so much of money, something like 6 lakhs, and then parliament. But it doesn't put any restriction on the party spending on the candidate or, let's say, the total expenditure. That's how For example, we said that there's 28,000 crores spent last year by BJP, and then we are saying this only over a period of time. The 6-7 years, they got about 8,000. That's nothing. That means an average is about 1,000 crores. But they're spending something like 30,000 crores. Where do they get that kind of money? The party spends it. And then therefore the candidate shows whatever accounts, even if he is genuine. No candidate, everybody knows, shows genuine accounts. But much of the money, this where I think the tip of the iceberg, we said, much of the money is collected, for instance, for BJP like party. It's a party supported by all kinds of moneyed interests. One of the major interests, the network of distributors, agencies. Every town has some kind of a network. If you say that if your electricals, building material, cement, paints, these are all, there is a huge conglomerate. But if you closely look at, these distributors are essentially from one particular area. I mean, that substantial part could be from Gujarat and Rajasthan. I can even name, let's say, the type of communities. They are the strong contributors or mobilizers of money. That's it comes in each place. You don't have to think in terms of, let's say, their contribution going back to that of BJP central party. Their account, even BJP party also puts accounts in the public domain. That's how we know that they are spending last year 28,000 crores. But we know that that is not the money. It's much more. We are saying the election bonds is small part of that money, but we know that money is not all the money. Everywhere, every candidate gets local kind of, let's say, contributions and the huge money. It is not shown either in the name of candidate.
What about small parties and independents and people like you and me? We can even
No.
think of contesting. So there is no level playing field. It is a farcical, elections are farcical. And as you rightly said, democracy, only hypocrisy.
Yeah. In fact, that's how we demand. There is strong need for this first past post kind of majority elections. There is need for strong rehauling. I mean, every country has this, no, that they, unless you cross 50%, you keep on, let's say, going for elections. And this is the only country which is, let's say, showing that the greatest democracy and doing all the kinds of this. It has become a shell, hollow. And therefore, it's time that there should be a drastic. Now, everybody says, if not bonds, how do you fund electoral? It is not that. It's of course, the present system is rotten. Therefore, reforming is not just here and there tinkering with that. You reform it in a way, go to representation, proportional representation, or go to that of, let's say, avoid this first post.
Last minute, sir. Last minute.
Yeah.
One word.
And this is what we learn is that there is something seriously wrong with our democratic system. And the present, let's say, electoral system itself reeks with that of incompetence and deception. And people have to see this, and perhaps once they see this, the demand is for overhaul of the system.
Reform electoral system, that is the only way the democracy in India will survive. Otherwise, it is for the cosmetic purposes, it is democracy. But when you, me, all those downtrodden middle classes, if they cannot contest elections, and even if they don't have any say in participation, then what sort of people participate in constitutional democracy this is? So this is for today. Thank you very much, sir. Do support DRTSP channels, Citizen DRTSP channel, and